And Senator Kennedy, you and your colleagues have pushed policies that would have kept my family out of this country. Ilhan Omar's voice rang through the Senate hearing room sharp with indignation. She pointed directly at Kennedy, who sat 4 seats down from Chairman Grassley, watching her with an expression of patient curiosity. Your rhetoric about vetting refugees, about extreme vetting, about treating people fleeing war zones as security threats, that kind of language has real consequences. You don't understand what it's like to flee persecution, to spend years in a refugee camp, to watch your family suffer. Omar paused for effect, her burgundy hijab catching the television lights as she scanned the Republican members of the committee. And then to come to a country that promised refuge, promised safety, promised opportunity, only to be treated as suspicious, as less than, as a threat. Kennedy still hadn't moved. His fingers remained steepled in front of him. I am tired. Tired of having my patriotism questioned, of having my loyalty questioned, of being told that because I am Muslim, because I am black, because I am an immigrant, that somehow I have divided loyalties. Several Democratic senators nodded. There was scattered applause from the gallery before Chairman Grassley's gavel silenced it. Representative Omar. Thank you for that testimony, Grassley said. We'll proceed to questions. Senator Kennedy. Kennedy leaned forward, his Louisiana accent thick and warm. Ms. Omar, I appreciate your passion. I surely do. And I want you to know I heard what you said about your family's refugee experience. Omar's expression softened slightly. But since you're here, and since you've raised questions about loyalty and vetting, I hope you won't mind if I ask you just a few questions to clear up some things. He picked up a document. Let's start with your marriages. Omar's face hardened immediately. That's my personal life, Senator. Well, yes, ma'am, normally I'd agree. But see, there are some public records that have raised questions. Just want to give you a chance to explain. Kennedy put on his reading glasses and examined the document as if seeing it for the first time, though everyone in the room knew he'd memorized every word. According to Minnesota state records in 2002, when you were 19 years old, you married a gentleman named Ahmed Hirsi. Is that correct? That was a religious marriage, Senator, not a legal marriage. I understand. So you and Mr. Hirsi had a religious ceremony, a Muslim ceremony, but didn't file any legal paperwork with the state. And then you had 2 children together. Is that right? Yes. And then, in 2008, you and Mr. Hirsi separated. Got what you've described as a religious divorce. Still no legal documents filed because there was no legal marriage. Do I have that right? Yes. Omar's voice was clipped wary. Okay. Now here's where I get a little confused. Kennedy looked up from the document, his expression genuinely puzzled. In 2009, you legally married a different man, a British citizen named Ahmed Noor Saeed Elmi. That marriage was filed with Hennepin County, legal and official. Is that correct? Yes, Senator, and we separated in 2011. Separated, yes. But you didn't get legally divorced until 2017, 6 years later. Is that also correct? That's correct. Kennedy nodded slowly, as if processing this information. So, just to make sure I understand the timeline, you're legally married to Mr. Elmi from 2009 to 2017, but you separated from him in 2011, and then he consulted another document. In June of 2012, you had a 3rd child. Is that right? Yes. And that child's father was Ahmed Hirsi, your first husband, the one you had the religious marriage with. Silence. Omar stared at Kennedy. Ms. Omar, is that child's father Ahmed Hirsi? Yes. The room had gone completely quiet. Even the press photographers had stopped moving. Kennedy removed his reading glasses and set them on the table. His voice remained gentle, conversational, but now there was steel underneath. So you were sleeping with Mr. Hirsi and having his baby while you were legally married to Mr. Elmi. Now, I'm not a fancy lawyer. Well, actually, I am a lawyer. I was Attorney General of Louisiana. But that sounds an awful lot like bigamy to me. Or, at the very least, it's what my mama would have called complicated. Senator, that's an offensive. I'm not done yet, ma'am. Kennedy's tone hadn't changed, still friendly, but now it was clear he wouldn't be interrupted. Because here's what's really interesting. In 2014 and 2015, while you were legally married to Mr. Elmi, you filed joint tax returns with Mr. Hersey. Federal tax returns. He held up 2 more documents. Now the IRS is real particular about this. You can only file joint returns if you're legally married. But you weren't legally married to Mr. Hersey. You were legally married to Mr. Elmi. So either you committed tax fraud by filing false joint returns, or you committed bigamy by being married to both men at the same time. Which is it? Omar's face had gone pale. Senator, this is a witch hunt. No, ma'am, these are public records, tax filings, marriage certificates, divorce papers, all filed with government agencies. I'm just trying to understand the timeline. Kennedy picked up another document. And here's another puzzling thing. When you finally filed for divorce from Mr. Elmi in 2017, you submitted an application to the Minnesota court. You signed it under oath. And in that document, you stated that you had not had any contact with Ahmed Elmi since June 2011, that you didn't know where he was, that you believed he was in London, but you couldn't reach him. Do you remember signing that document? I don't recall the specific. Well, let me help you remember. Kennedy pulled out a series of photographs. These photos were posted on your Instagram account in 2015. That's 4 years after you claimed you lost contact with Mr. Elmi. And unless my eyes are failing me, that's you in London. And that's a man identified as Ahmed Elmi, standing right next to you, smiling for the camera. He spread the photos across the table where the committee members could see them. So either you lied under oath when you said you had no contact with him since 2011, which would be perjury, or you have a very strange definition of no contact. Omar opened her mouth, but no words came out. Senator Kennedy leaned back in his chair and folded his arms. Ms. Omar, you came here today to lecture this committee about immigration fraud and vetting and loyalty. And I'm sure you'll understand why some of us have a few questions about your own immigration history, your marriage history, and your truthfulness under oath. He glanced at the clock. I've got about 4 minutes left, so let me ask you one simple question, and I'd appreciate a simple answer. Is Ahmed Noor Saeed Elmi your brother? The room exploded. The chairman's gavel came down hard. 3 times. 4. Finally, the chaos subsided enough for Kennedy to continue. Omar had recovered some of her composure. Her expression was a mixture of fury and calculated offense. Senator Kennedy, that question is disgusting. It is based on racist conspiracy theories promoted by right-wing websites. I will not dignify it with a response. Kennedy nodded amiably. I understand you think it's disgusting, ma'am, but it's actually just a question. A yes or no question. Is Ahmed Noor Saeed Elmi your brother? I have answered this question repeatedly. The answer is no. Actually, ma'am, what you've said is that the allegations are absurd and offensive. What you haven't done is provide any documentation to prove they're false. Kennedy pulled out more documents. See, here's what's got folks confused. Ahmed Elmi is listed as being 3 years younger than you. You've said publicly you're the youngest of 7 children, but his birth date on your marriage certificate would make him younger than you, which is odd if he's not your sibling. Senator, I am not going to, and both of you attended North Dakota State University. Both lived in Minnesota. In fact, according to public records, at one point, you, Mr. Elmi, and Mr. Hersey were all using the same address in Minneapolis. All 3 of you, living in the same apartment. Omar's jaw tightened. Now, I don't know about you, ma'am, But most people don't live with their husband and their ex-husband at the same time. Unless, Kennedy paused, as if the thought had just occurred to him, unless Mr. Elmy wasn't actually your husband at all. Unless he was your brother and you married him to help him get immigration benefits. That is a vile accusation. It's a question, ma'am, and it's a question you could answer real easily. You could release your immigration records. You could authorize your family members to speak to investigators. Your father could clear this up. Your siblings could clear this up. There's allegedly even a DNA report floating around, though I haven't seen it myself, that would settle this once and for all. Kennedy leaned forward. But you won't do any of that. You won't release the records. You won't let your family speak. You won't submit to DNA testing. Why? Because I don't have to prove anything to conspiracy theorists and racists. Ma'am, I'm a United States Senator conducting oversight of immigration fraud. That's not a conspiracy theory. That's my job. He consulted his notes. Let me read you something. This is from the Minneapolis Star-Tribune, not exactly a right-wing website. After investigating these allegations, they wrote, and I quote, "The search of records could neither conclusively confirm nor rebut the allegation that he is Omar's sibling." They couldn't confirm it, but they couldn't rule it out either. Do you know why? Omar said nothing. Because you won't cooperate. You won't provide the documentation that would prove you're telling the truth. And that makes people wonder what you're hiding. Senator Hirono interrupted. Mr. Chairman, I object to this line of questioning. The senator is badgering the witness with unproven allegations. I'm asking questions about public records, Senator Hirono, Kennedy replied. Marriage certificates, divorce filings, tax returns, immigration documents, all matters of public record and legitimate congressional oversight. He turned back to Omar. Ms. Omar, you told this committee that we don't understand what it's like to be a refugee, that we don't understand persecution. And you're probably right. But here's what I do understand. The American people have a right to know if their elected representatives are telling the truth. They have a right to know if someone committed immigration fraud to enter this country or to help someone else enter this country. Kennedy's voice hardened slightly. You took an oath when you became a citizen. You swore to support and defend the Constitution. You renounced allegiance to foreign powers. And then you took another oath when you became a congresswoman. But if you committed immigration fraud, if you married your brother to circumvent immigration laws, then both of those oaths were lies from the very beginning. I committed no fraud. Omar's voice was sharp, defensive. Then prove it. Release the records. Let investigators talk to your family. Submit to DNA testing. Clear your name. I will not be subjected to... Why not? Kennedy's folksy demeanor had completely fallen away now. If you're innocent, if this is all just a racist conspiracy theory, then the evidence would prove that. But you won't provide the evidence. And that tells me everything I need to know. He glanced at the chairman. Mr. Chairman, I have more questions for Ms. Omar, but I see my time has expired. I yield back. Grassley nodded. Senator Durbin, you're recognized for 7 minutes. As Durbin began his questions, softball questions designed to let Omar recover, Kennedy sat back in his chair and made notes on his legal pad. He was just getting started. An hour later, after several other senators had questioned Omar with varying degrees of aggression and sympathy, Kennedy's second round arrived. Omar had regained much of her composure. The Democratic senators had given her opportunities to reframe the immigration questions as attacks on refugees, generally to pivot to her policy positions to paint herself as a victim of racism and Islamophobia. She probably thought the worst was over. Kennedy activated his microphone. Ms. Omar, I want to talk about your current husband, Tim Minett. Omar's expression became wary. What does my husband have to do with immigration fraud? Well, we'll get to that. But first, let's establish the timeline. You and Mr. Minette got married in March 2020. Is that correct? Yes. And before you married him, he was working as a political consultant. His firm was called the E Street Group. Is that right? Yes, his firm provided services to my campaign. Services, yes. Let's talk about those services. Kennedy pulled out a thick folder of documents. According to Federal Election Commission records from 2018 through 2020, your campaign paid the E Street Group approximately $2.9 million. Does that number sound right to you? I don't have the exact figure in front of me, but our campaign properly reported all expenditures. $2.9 million, ma'am. And according to an analysis by the Washington Free Beacon that represented 78% of the E Street Group's total revenue during that period. 78%. Essentially, your campaign was Mr. Minette's entire business. Omar said nothing. And those payments, $2.9 million, made up 56% of your campaign's total expenditures. More than half your campaign spending went to your boyfriend's firm. Because he was your boyfriend at the time, wasn't he? Senator, the services were legitimate. I didn't ask if they were legitimate. I asked if he was your boyfriend. Kennedy pulled out more documents. Let me read from the divorce filing submitted by Beth Minette, Mr. Minette's wife at the time. She stated, and I quote, "The parties physically separated on or about April 7, 2019, when defendant told plaintiff that he was romantically involved with and in love with another woman, Ilhan Omar." He looked up. So in April 2019, Mr. Minette told his wife he was having an affair with you. Is that correct? I'm not going to discuss someone else's divorce. Fair enough? But let's look at what happened next. After Mr. Minette confessed the affair in April 2019, your campaign's payments to his firm increased dramatically. In fact, in the 8 months following his confession, your campaign paid his firm over $1 million. Kennedy spread out the FEC reports. So let me make sure I understand this. You're having an affair with a married man. Your campaign is paying his firm millions of dollars money donated by working Americans who believed in your campaign. His wife finds out about the affair and divorces him. You divorce your husband, and then you marry Mr. Minette, who has now received nearly $3 million from your campaign. He paused. Does that seem appropriate to you? The Federal Election Commission reviewed these payments and found no violations. Actually, ma'am, the FEC received a complaint from the National Legal and Policy Center. They alleged that your campaign violated federal law by failing to properly itemize $21,546 in travel reimbursements to Mr. Minette. The complaint stated that these payments were deliberately obscured to hide the fact that you two were having an affair. The FEC ordered your campaign to amend its filings. We amended the filings as requested. After you got caught, Kennedy pulled out another document. And then there's the Minnesota Campaign Finance Board. They also investigated your campaign spending, found that you improperly used campaign funds for personal travel. You were ordered to repay your campaign committee $3,500 and pay a $500 civil penalty. Remember that was a minor accounting error. It was a violation of campaign finance law, ma'am. Kennedy leaned back and removed his glasses, a gesture that made him look less like an aggressive prosecutor and more like a disappointed school teacher. But here's what really interests me. After you married Mr. Minette in 2020, after all this controversy about campaign payments, he suddenly gets out of the political consulting business. The E Street Group closes down, and Mr. Minette starts a new venture capital firm called Rose Lake Capital. My husband is entitled to pursue his business interests. Oh, I agree. But here's the interesting part. Kennedy consulted his notes. According to court documents filed in South Dakota, there was a lawsuit involving some cannabis companies. Rose Lake Capital had $42.24 in its bank account in early 2024. $42.24. He looked up. But then, by the end of 2024, according to your own financial disclosure forms filed with the House of Representatives, Rose Lake Capital was worth between $5 million and $25 million. That's quite a growth rate, isn't it? From $42 to $25 million in less than a year. Omar shifted in her seat. Senator, my husband's business success.
Ms. Omar, do you know what Rose Lake Capital does?
It's a venture capital management firm. Yes, but what does it actually do? Who are its clients? What investments has it made? Where did that money come from? Omar said nothing. Because here's what's curious. The firm's website says it has extensive international ties and expertise in diplomacy, legislation, and politics. But it won't say who its clients are. It won't say where it invests. It's completely opaque. Kennedy leaned forward. You're a member of Congress. You sit on the House Foreign Affairs Committee. You have access to classified information. You have influence over U.S. foreign policy. And your husband runs a mysterious venture capital firm with international ties that won't disclose its clients or its investments. Does that concern you at all? My husband's firm is entirely legal. I didn't ask if it was legal. I asked if it concerned you. Kennedy gathered his documents. Let me tell you how this looks from Louisiana, ma'am. It looks like you funneled almost $3 million in campaign funds to your boyfriend. Then you married him. Then he shut down the consulting firm and started a new firm that mysteriously became worth millions of dollars. And this firm has foreign connections, but won't say what those connections are. He looked directly at Omar. You came here today to lecture us about corruption, about dark money, about foreign influence. But it seems to me you're running a family business using campaign funds, and your husband is now worth millions through a company nobody can explain. That's a disgusting mischaracterization. It's a description of your FEC filings, ma'am. Kennedy checked the clock. He still had 3 minutes. One more thing. You mentioned earlier that you were tired of questions about your loyalty, that Republicans question whether Muslim Americans are truly American. Do you remember saying that? Yes. Well, I want to address that because I think it's important. Kennedy's voice became more serious. I don't question your loyalty because you're Muslim. I question your loyalty because of your actions, because you possibly committed immigration fraud, because you funneled campaign money to your boyfriend, now husband, because you enriched your family while claiming to fight corruption. He paused. This isn't about your religion, Ms. Omar. This is about your conduct. And hiding behind accusations of Islamophobia doesn't change the facts. The room was completely silent. I yield back, Mr. Chairman. By the third round of questioning, Omar had largely stopped responding to Kennedy directly. She gave evasive answers, deferred to her lawyers, or simply repeated talking points about racist attacks. But Kennedy wasn't deterred. Ms. Omar, I want to talk about September 11, 2001. Omar's expression became guarded immediately. She knew where this was going. On March 23, 2019, you gave a speech at a Council on American Islamic Relations event in Los Angeles. Do you remember that speech? I've given many speeches, Senator. I'm sure you have. But this was a particularly memorable one. Let me refresh your memory. Kennedy pulled out a transcript. You said, and I quote, CARE was founded after 9/11 because they recognized that some people did something and that all of us were starting to lose access to our civil liberties. He looked up. Some people did something. That's how you described September 11th. Is that correct? Senator, that quote has been taken completely out of context. I've read the entire speech, ma'am, multiple times. The context doesn't help. You described the worst terror Terrorist Attack Act in American history, an attack that killed 2,977 people as some people did something. Kennedy's voice remained calm, but there was an edge now. 19 Islamic terrorists hijacked 4 commercial airplanes. They flew 2 of them into the World Trade Center towers. They flew 1 into the Pentagon. Passengers on the 4th plane fought back, and it crashed in Pennsylvania. Nearly 3,000 Americans died. Firefighters running into burning buildings. Police officers trying to evacuate people. Office workers trapped on upper floors. People who had to choose between burning to death or jumping 100 stories. He paused, and you called it, "Some people did something." Senator, I was discussing the civil liberties implications. No, ma'am, you were minimizing a terrorist attack. Some people did something is what you say when someone ate your leftovers from the office refrigerator. It's not what you say about the deliberate mass murder of American citizens. Kennedy pulled out another document. Do you know Nicholas Harros, Jr.? Omar shook her head. His mother, Frances Harros, was killed in the World Trade Center. She was 76 years old. She had gone to work that morning, same as always, and she never came home. And on September 11, 2019, the 18th anniversary of the attacks, Nicholas Harros, Jr. went to Ground Zero to read victims' names at the memorial ceremony. Kennedy's voice became quiet, forceful. He wore a T-shirt. And on that T-shirt were your words, "Some people did something." And he stood in front of thousands of people and said this. And I'm reading from the transcript, "Madam, objectively speaking, we know who and what was done. There is no uncertainty about that. Why your confusion?" On that day, 19 Islamic terrorists members of al-Qaeda killed over 3,000 people and caused billions in dollars of economic damage. Is that clear? Kennedy looked directly at Omar. He was talking to you, Ms. Omar, a man whose mother was murdered, asking you why you couldn't clearly state what happened on 9/11, why you had to minimize it as "some people did something." Senator, I have mourned the victims of 9/11. Have you? Because you never apologized for that statement. You apologized for your anti-Semitic tweets, and we'll get to those, but you never apologized to the families of 9/11 victims. Omar started to respond, but Kennedy cut her off. And here's what makes it worse. After the New York Post ran a cover with your quote and a photo of the burning towers after the president tweeted a video showing your words alongside footage of the attacks after Nicholas Harros, Jr. called you out at Ground Zero, your response was to claim you were the victim. You said these criticisms endangered your life. You said people were taking your words out of context. Kennedy leaned forward. Ms. Omar, 3,000 Americans died. 3,000 funerals, 3,000 families who never got to say goodbye, children who grew up without parents, parents who buried their children. And you can't even bring yourself to clearly condemn the attack without qualifications, without pivoting, to talk about civil liberties without minimizing what happened. I have condemned terrorism. Then why did you describe 9/11 as "some people did something"? Those are your words. In your own speech, not taken out of context, not twisted by conservative media, your exact words. Omar's jaw tightened. Senator, I was speaking to a Muslim audience about how we were treated after 9/11. You were speaking at a CARE event, the Council on American Islamic Relations, an organization that was named as an unindicted co-conspirator in the largest terrorism financing case in American history, the Holy Land Foundation case, an organization that had members who were convicted of funneling money to Hamas. That's who you were speaking to. Kennedy picked up another document, and in that speech you told your audience to raise hell, make people uncomfortable. You said Muslims were being treated as second-class citizens and you were tired of it. But you couldn't clearly state what the 19 hijackers actually did on September 11. Because I was talking about civil liberties, not relitigating the attacks. Ms. Omar, I'm from Louisiana. We had folks who died on 9/11 too. They weren't from New York or Washington. They were regular Americans who happened to be on those planes or in those buildings. And their families, all those families, they don't need you to relitigate anything. They just need you to show basic respect for what happened. Kennedy's voice rose slightly. But you can't do that, can you? Because to you, 9/11 is primarily about how it affected Muslims, about civil liberties, about being made uncomfortable. The actual victims, the people who died, who suffered, who lost loved ones, they're secondary to your narrative about Muslim victimhood. That's not true. Then why didn't you apologize? You apologized for anti-Semitism. You apologized for campaign finance violations. But you never apologized for minimizing 9/11. Why? Omar said nothing. Kennedy sat back. I'll tell you why. Because you don't think you did anything wrong. You think the real tragedy of 9/11 is how it made Muslims feel uncomfortable. Not the 3,000 people who died. Not the families destroyed. Not the first responders who are still dying from toxic exposure at Ground Zero. He gathered his papers. Ms. Omar, you came here today as a witness about immigration and national security. But what you've shown us is that you don't understand what national security means. You don't understand that 9/11 was an attack on America. Not an inconvenience. Not some people did something. An attack by terrorists who wanted to kill as many Americans as possible. Kennedy looked at the clock. His time was almost up. And the fact that you can't say that clearly, without qualification, without making yourself the victim, that tells me everything I need to know about where your sympathies lie. He looked at Chairman Grassley. I yield back. The hearing had been going for nearly 4 hours. Omar looked exhausted. Her lawyers had called for a recess twice, but Chairman Grassley had denied both requests. Kennedy's fourth round of questions began. Ms. Omar, let's talk about Israel. Several Democratic senators immediately tensed. This was dangerous territory. Senator, I have been very clear about my criticism of the Israeli government's policies. Yes, you have. Very clear. Let's review some of that clarity. Kennedy pulled out a series of screenshots blown up to poster size. He had them mounted on foam board, and an aide set them up on easels where everyone in the room could see them. This is a tweet you posted in 2012, before you were in Congress. It says, Israel has hypnotized the world. May Allah awaken the people and help them see the evil doings of Israel. Do you remember tweeting that? That was many years ago. It was anti-Semitic, wasn't it? I have apologized for that tweet. Yes, you have. After you got caught. After people pointed out that saying Jews hypnotized the world is a classic anti-Semitic trope going back centuries. The idea that Jews use mystical powers to deceive people. You apologized. So let's move forward. Kennedy pointed to the next poster. February 2019. You're now in Congress. There's a discussion about IPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. And you tweet this, it's all about the Benjamin's baby. He looked at Omar. That's a reference to $100 bills, isn't it? You were saying that support for Israel is bought with money. I was criticizing IPAC's lobbying by suggesting Jewish money controls politicians. That's another anti-Semitic trope, Ms. Omar. The idea that Jews use money to control governments. It's been used to justify persecution of Jews for centuries. Kennedy pointed to another screenshot. And when someone asked you who you thought was paying American politicians to be pro-Israel, you replied with one word, AIPAC. You want to explain that? IPAC is a lobbying organization. It's a pro-Israel organization largely supported by Jewish Americans. And you suggested they were buying politicians. That's not policy criticism, ma'am. That's anti-Semitism. Kennedy walked over to stand next to the posters. But wait, there's more. In March 2019, you said this during a town hall. I want to talk about the political influence in this country that says it is okay to push for allegiance to a foreign country. He turned to face Omar. Allegiance to a foreign country. You were talking about American Jews who support Israel, weren't you? Suggesting they have divided loyalties, that they're more loyal to Israel than to America. I was talking about lobbying groups. No, ma'am, you were questioning the loyalty of American Jews. That's the dual loyalty trope. It's the same accusation that's been used against Jews in every country they've ever lived in. The same accusation that was used to justify the Holocaust. Kennedy's voice had grown harder. And do you know how your own party responded to these comments? He pulled out another document. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer, Majority Whip Jim Clyburn. The entire Democratic leadership issued a joint statement. Let me read it. Anti-Semitism must be called out, confronted, and condemned whenever it is encountered without exception. He looked up. Your own party condemned you. Not Republicans. Your own Democratic colleagues. Kennedy walked back to his seat and picked up more documents. Representative Eliot Engel, who was then chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. The committee you serve on said your comments were deeply offensive. He said they call into question the loyalty of fellow American citizens. He asked you to retract your statement. And Representative Nita Lowey, who chaired the Appropriations Committee, she criticized you publicly too. Do you remember what you said to her? Omar said nothing. You told her she shouldn't be expected to have allegiance, pledge support to a foreign country in order to serve my country. You doubled down. You accused a Jewish congresswoman of having foreign allegiance simply because she supported Israel. Kennedy spread out newspaper headlines. You had to apologize 3 times, Ms. Omar. 3 separate apologies for anti-Semitic statements. And each time you said you were learning about anti-Semitic tropes that you didn't realize that you were sorry. He leaned forward. But here's my question. How many times do you get to claim ignorance? At what point does a pattern of anti-Semitic statements stop being innocent mistakes and start being actual anti-Semitism? Senator, I have Jewish friends. I have worked with Jewish organizations. That's the sum of my best friend's defense, ma'am. It doesn't excuse anti-Semitism. Kennedy picked up another document. The Anti-Defamation League, which has spent a century fighting anti-Semitism, they said you were trafficking in anti-Semitic tropes. The American Jewish Committee condemned your statements. The Simon Wiesenthal Center demanded your removal from the Foreign Affairs Committee. He paused. These aren't right-wing organizations, Ms. Omar. These are the leading Jewish civil rights groups in America. And they all said the same thing. Your statements were anti-Semitic. Kennedy sat back down. Now you came here today and talked about Islamophobia, about how it's wrong to judge all Muslims based on the actions of terrorists. And you're right about that. But here's what I find interesting. You expect people to judge you as an individual, to not hold you responsible for what other Muslims do. But when it comes to Jews, you're perfectly comfortable suggesting they're all bought by IPAC money, that they all have foreign allegiances, that they're all hypnotizing the world. That's not what I said. It's exactly what you said. Those are your tweets, your words, your public statements. Kennedy's voice became quieter, more intense. Ms. Omar, there are 15 million Jews in the world. 15 million. Out of 8 billion people. That's less than 0.2% of the global population. And in virtually every generation, in virtually every country, someone has tried to blame them for something. Someone has accused them of controlling governments with money, or having divided loyalties, or using mystical powers to deceive people. He leaned forward. And those accusations always lead to violence. Pogroms, expulsions, ultimately genocide. 6 million Jews murdered in the Holocaust. And it started with exactly the kind of rhetoric you've been spreading. Senator, I have condemned anti-Semitism after you got caught, after your own party condemned you. after you'd already spread the poison. Kennedy gathered his materials. You know what the real tragedy is? You're a member of Congress. You have a platform. You could use that platform to build bridges between communities, to fight real bigotry, to bring people together. But instead, you've used it to spread anti-Semitic tropes, to question the loyalty of American Jews, to suggest that support for Israel is bought rather than genuine. He looked directly at her. You lecture Republicans about hate, about prejudice, about seeing people as individuals rather than stereotypes. But you're the one spreading hate. You're the one trafficking in ancient prejudices. And hiding behind accusations of Islamophobia doesn't change that. Kennedy checked the clock. I yield back. Chairman Grassley announced a 15-minute recess. When the hearing reconvened, Omar's lawyers had clearly coached her to provide even more limited responses, to invoke her Fifth Amendment rights if necessary, to run out the clock. But Kennedy had one more topic to address. Ms. Omar, on January 27, 2024, you gave a speech at the Hyatt Regency Hotel in Minneapolis. The speech was in Somali. Were you there? I attend many events in my district. That's a yes or no question. Were you at the Hyatt Regency on January 27, 2024? Yes. And you gave a speech in the Somali language? Yes. Good. Now, there's been some dispute about the translation of that speech. Your office said the translation that went viral was inaccurate. So I had our staff hire 3 independent translators who are certified court interpreters, native Somali speakers. They reviewed the video, and while there were some minor differences in wording, they all agreed on the key points. Kennedy activated a screen and video began to play. Omar's voice speaking in Somali with English subtitles at the bottom. The room watched in silence as Omar told the crowd, "We are people of brotherhood, people of blood, people who know themselves to be Somalis, to be Muslims." The video continued. Omar speaking about Somalia's territorial disputes with Ethiopia and Somaliland. Then came the key passage. As long as I am in Congress, no one will take Somalia's sea. The United States will not support others to take our land or oceans. Sleep in comfort, knowing I am here to protect the interests of Somalia from inside the U.S. system. Kennedy paused the video. Did you say that, Ms. Omar? Senator, as I've explained, that translation is, I'm not asking about the translation. I'm asking about what you said. Did you tell a room full of Somalis that you're in Congress to protect Somalia's interests from inside the U.S. system? Omar hesitated. I was expressing support for U.S. policy. No, ma'am. You said you were there to protect Somalia's interests, not American interests, not your constituents' interests, Somalia's interests. Kennedy played more of the video. The U.S. government will do what we tell the U.S. government to do. We as Somalis should have that confidence in ourselves. We live in this country. We pay taxes in this country. It's a country where one of your own sits in Congress. Kennedy stopped the video again. One of your own. You were talking about yourself. And you were identifying yourself as Somali, not American. Is that correct? I am both Somali and American. But which comes first? Kennedy's voice was sharp. Because in that speech, you identified yourself as Somali. You talked about protecting Somalia's interests. You said the U.S. government would do what Somalis tell it to do. You never mentioned America. You never mentioned your oath to the Constitution. You talked about Somalia. He picked up a document. And you're not the only one who noticed. Rhoda Elmi, the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs for Somaliland, she posted about your speech. Let me read what she said. The language she employed was regrettably unbecoming of both the office she holds and the constituents she represents. Her expressions were lacking in common decency and revealed a significant lack of understanding of basic facts. Kennedy looked up. That's a foreign diplomat criticizing a member of the U.S. Congress for prioritizing Somalia over America. Does that concern you? Senator, Somaliland is not recognized. I'm not asking about Somaliland. I'm asking about your priorities, about your loyalty. Kennedy walked around to the front of the table. Ms. Omar, when you became an American citizen, you took an oath. You swore to renounce and abjure all allegiance and fidelity to any foreign prince, potentate, state, or sovereignty. Do you remember taking that oath? Yes? And when you were sworn into Congress, you took another oath. You swore to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. Not Somalia, not Islam, the United States. Do you remember that oath? Yes. Then explain to me how giving a speech in Somali to a Somali audience promising to protect Somalia's interests from inside the U.S. system is consistent with those oaths. Omar said nothing. You know what that sounds like to me? It sounds like you think of yourself as Somalia's representative in Congress. Like you're here to advocate for a foreign government. Like America is just a convenient platform for advancing Somalia's agenda. That's absurd. Is it because earlier today you lectured this committee about dual loyalty? You said it was anti-Semitic to question whether American Jews are loyal to Israel. But here you are in your own words on video declaring that you're in Congress to protect Somalia's interests. Kennedy's voice rose. So, which is it, Ms. Omar, is questioning someone's loyalty to America always wrong, or is it only wrong when we question your loyalty? He walked back to his seat and picked up more documents. House Majority Whip Tom Emmer, your colleague from Minnesota, he called your speech a direct violation of your oath of office. He said you should resign in disgrace. Do you think he's wrong? Congressman Emmer is playing politics. Governor Ron DeSantis went further. He called for you to be denaturalized and deported. Now, I don't know if I'd go that far, but I understand his point. If you came to this country under false pretenses, if you committed immigration fraud, if you're using your position to advance a foreign government's interests, then maybe you shouldn't be a citizen at all. Omar's lawyers leaned in to confer with her. Kennedy pressed on. You know what the American people want, Ms. Omar. They want their representatives to put America first. Not Somalia first, not Islam first, America first. He gestured to the frozen image on the screen. But that's not what you said in Minneapolis, is it? You didn't even mention America. You talked about blood and brotherhood and protecting Somalia. You told Somalis they could sleep in comfort because you were there to protect their interests. Kennedy leaned forward, his voice cutting. Who's sleeping comfortable about America, Ms. Omar? Who's sleeping comfortable knowing that a member of Congress, with access to classified information, with a vote on foreign policy, with influence over immigration and national security, who's sleeping comfortable knowing she thinks her primary loyalty is to Somalia? I have never said my primary loyalty. You didn't have to say it. You showed it. You showed it in that speech. You showed it when you married someone who might be your brother to get him into this country. You showed it when you minimized 9/11. You showed it when you funneled campaign money to your boyfriend. You showed it when you attacked Israel and questioned American Jews' loyalty while declaring your own loyalty to Somalia. Kennedy stood up. Ms. Omar, you're not a victim. You're not being persecuted. You're not being attacked because of your race or religion or immigrant background. You're being questioned because of your conduct, because of your statements, because of your priorities. He gathered all his documents, all his posters, all his evidence. You came to this hearing to lecture us about immigration fraud and vetting. But what you've shown us today is exactly why we need strong vetting. Because we don't want people who come to this country only to use it as a platform for advancing foreign interests. We don't want people who take an oath to the Constitution while keeping their fingers crossed behind their back. Kennedy looked directly at Omar. America gave you refuge. America gave you opportunity. America gave you a path to citizenship and, ultimately, to Congress. And how did you repay that? By possibly committing immigration fraud, by enriching your family with campaign funds, by spreading anti-Semitism, by minimizing 9/11, and by declaring that you're here to protect Somalia, not America. His voice dropped, became quieter but more intense. You're not the future of the Democratic Party, Ms. Omar. You're a cautionary tale, a warning about what happens when we don't properly vet refugees, when we don't enforce campaign finance laws, when we allow identity politics to excuse corruption and bigotry. Kennedy picked up one final document. Mr. Chairman, I move that this committee refer Representative Omar's testimony to the Department of Justice for investigation of potential perjury, immigration, fraud, tax fraud, and campaign finance violations. I further move that we refer this matter to the House Ethics Committee for investigation of whether Representative Omar has violated her oath of office and whether she remains fit to serve in Congress. He looked around the room. I also move that we request a full audit of Rose Lake Capital and its foreign connections, given the national security implications of a sitting member of Congress being married to someone running an opaque venture capital firm with international ties. Chairman Grassley banged his gavel. The motions are noted and will be taken under consideration. Ms. Omar, you are excused. Omar stood, her lawyers flanking her. She walked toward the exit, her face a mask of fury and humiliation. As she passed Kennedy's seat, he spoke one more time, his voice carrying in the silent room. Ms. Omar, I want you to know something. This isn't personal. This is about the truth. And the truth is, you had every advantage America could offer. You could have been a symbol of what makes this country great, the ability to come here with nothing and achieve anything. But instead, you've become a symbol of betrayal, of ingratitude, of corruption. He paused. Some people did something. That's what you said about 9/11. Well, Ms. Omar, some person did something today. Some person came before this committee and showed us exactly who she is. And all of us, all Americans, we're going to remember that. Omar didn't respond. She walked out of the hearing room without looking back. The room erupted into chaos. The C-SPAN video of the hearing hit 50 million views within 24 hours. By the end of the week, it had been viewed 94 million times across all platforms. The mainstream media tried to frame it as a Republican attack, as racism and Islamophobia. But the Democratic Party was notably silent. Pelosi wouldn't comment. Schumer wouldn't comment. Even squad members AOC and Rashida Tlaib offered only tepid defenses. The Minnesota Star-Tribune ran an in-depth investigation. They interviewed the Somali translators. They reviewed the FEC filings. They talked to former staffers. Their conclusion, Kennedy had accurately represented the facts. 2 weeks after the hearing, the Department of Justice announced it was opening investigations into potential immigration fraud, tax fraud, and perjury. The House Ethics Committee launched its own investigation. 3 weeks later, Omar lost her seat on the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Democratic leadership, under pressure from moderate members facing tough re-elections, quietly removed her. A primary challenger emerged, Abdi Warsam, a Somali-American Marine Corps veteran who had served 2 tours in Afghanistan. His first campaign ad featured him in uniform, his hand over his heart, reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. "I am American first," he said in the ad. "I served this country, I bled for this country, and I will always put America first." The ad went viral immediately. Rose Lake Capital's website went dark. Tim Minott declined all interview requests. Reporters who tried to identify the firm's clients and investments hit dead ends. In Minneapolis, Omar's own constituents began asking questions. At a town hall 3 weeks after the hearing, she faced a room full of angry voters. "Why didn't you tell us about the tax returns?" one asked. "Why did you give your husband's company $3 million?" asked another. "Did you marry your brother?" shouted someone from the back. Omar tried her usual tactics. She called it a witch hunt. She accused her critics of racism. She claimed she was being targeted because she was a strong woman of color who spoke truth to power. But this time it didn't work. An elderly Somali man stood up. He was wearing a veteran's cap. He'd served in the U.S. Army after coming to America as a refugee in the 1990s. "Ms. Omar," he said, his accent thick but his words clear, "I came to this country with nothing, just like you. I was grateful. I served in the Army. I raised my children to be Americans, to love this country, to respect this country." He paused, his voice breaking slightly. "But you came here and you used America. You took advantage of America. You betrayed America. And you made all of us look bad. All Somali Americans, all Muslim Americans. You made people think we're all like you." He shook his head. "You shame us. You shame your family. You shame our community." The room erupted in applause. Omar tried to respond, but her words were drowned out by the cheering. She left the town hall early, rushed to her car by security as protesters chanted outside. The hashtag fraud from Somalia trended for 3 days straight. In Louisiana, Senator Kennedy gave an interview to Fox News. When asked if he felt he'd been too harsh, he smiled that folksy smile. "Look, I don't enjoy exposing people. I truly don't. But Ms. Omar came to that hearing to lecture us about our immigration policies, about our security measures, about our vetting. And I thought the American people deserved to know who was doing the lecturing." The host asked if Omar would survive politically. Kennedy's smile faded. "That's up to the voters of Minnesota. But I'll tell you what I think. I think the American people are tired of being told they're racist for wanting strong borders. They're tired of being told they're Islamophobic for expecting immigrants to be grateful for the opportunities this country provides. And they're real tired of being told they're wrong to expect their representatives to put America first." He paused. Ms. Omar had every advantage. She had the American dream handed to her on a silver platter. Refugee camp to Congress in 1 generation. That's an incredible story. That's what makes America special. His voice hardened. But instead of being grateful, instead of serving this country, she used her position to enrich herself, to spread anti-Semitism, to minimize 9/11, and to advance Somalia's interests. That's not the American dream. That's the American nightmare. Kennedy leaned back in his chair. "Some people did something terrible, and those people need to be held accountable. That's all we did at that hearing. We held her accountable." 6 months later, Abdi Warsame defeated Ilhan Omar in the Democratic primary by 12 points. In his victory speech, he was gracious. "I don't hate Representative Omar," he said. "I pray for her. I pray she finds peace. But I'm grateful that the voters of this district have decided they want someone who will put America first. Someone who understands that being an American is an honor, not an opportunity for exploitation." The crowd chanted, "USA, USA, USA." Omar released a statement saying she was leaving politics to spend more time with her family and to work on issues of social justice from outside government. She never addressed the specific allegations from Kennedy's questioning, never explained the marriage timeline, never released the immigration records, never accounted for the campaign money to her husband. She just disappeared from public life. 1 year after the hearing, a reporter from The Atlantic tracked down Nicholas Harros Jr., the 9/11 victim's son, who had confronted Omar at Ground Zero. "Do you feel vindicated?" the reporter asked. Harros was quiet for a long moment. "Vindicated, numb. My mother is still gone. 3,000 people are still dead. Nothing brings them back." He looked at the photo of his mother he kept on his desk. "But I'm glad people finally saw who she was. I'm glad they finally understood that "Some people did something" wasn't just a poorly worded phrase. It was a window into how she really felt. About America. About 9/11. About all of us. He turned back to the reporter. Senator Kennedy did what needed to be done. He asked the questions everyone was afraid to ask. He spoke the truth everyone was afraid to speak. And he didn't apologize for it. Haros smiled sadly. My mother would have liked him. She didn't suffer fools. She believed in accountability. She believed in truth. He gestured to the window where you could see the rebuilt tower rising above Manhattan. That's her memorial. That tower. That determination to rebuild. That refusal to be defeated. That's America. He looked back at the reporter. And people like Ilhan Omar. They'll never understand that. They'll never understand what it means to be American. Not really. Because being American isn't about the advantages you can extract. It's about the values you uphold. He paused. Some people understand that. And some people never will. In the Senate, Kennedy kept a copy of the hearing transcript on his desk. Visitors would sometimes ask about it. That's the day we defended America, he'd say simply. That's the day we said that being an American means something, that taking an oath means something, that the truth matters. And then he'd smile that folksy smile. Some people did something. Turned out that something was telling the truth. And the truth set a lot of people free.